10 years for the other. He's got his headphones in, that's why I can't get home. He's hearing the sound of the room. And who's with Janet tonight? Yeah. No woman? Who's with Janet tonight?
That'll must be help, yeah. Oh, I think that's the same. How are
Call this special meeting of public forum of the Palestine Council order. Tonight we're going to hear from an architect firm, Michael Baker and Associates. We'll ask some questions and comments after. Yeah.
Good evening. 4 months, we've had the opportunity to have conversations with dozens of community members and community leaders. And through those conversations, it became extremely apparent that the park was a priority to this community. You know, it's clear that this park has a lot of history. It's the jewel of this community, and the pride that you all have for this park is really obvious. And it's clear why. It's a gorgeous park. And you were directly asked by community members to support this project, and we're really excited. We think it's going to have a great impact for the entire community to enjoy. A few things I do want to clarify up front is that Peter's going to present the master plan. This is very much a high-level overview right now. Nothing is set in stone. There's going to be a lot of other steps that occur after this. We'll get into more of the design and rendering phase, and also the overall timeline in the rollout of the plan. This project will be paid for entirely by Norfolk Southern, and through conversations with community members, one of the things that was highlighted was that we focus on the features of the park that will be revenue generating and sustainable for the long term. And I'm going to ask, I have Dave Becker with us today. He is the chief engineer at Norfolk Southern, and if I missed anything, please feel free to jump in. But we're really excited about this project, and like I said, I think it's going to have a great impact on the community for the long term. And as we get into those next phases of the project, we're going to continue to solicit community feedback and to make sure that we're really responding to the needs of this community. All right, so with that, I'll pass it over to Peter. We'll go to the details.
Great, thank you, and thank you everybody for coming. Can everybody hear me in the back of the room? Awesome, great, awesome, great. So we're going to get started, and I think the first thing I want to talk about is what are some of the pieces we're going to talk about in this presentation. We're going to look at safety and parking, overall park concept ideas, the aquatic center. We're going to talk about the community center, the playground areas, the brick pavilion, the toilets and shelters and trails along the park, and also this concept of an amphitheater. The one thing I would like for everybody to keep in mind is just like Christine just mentioned, you know, this is kind of like understanding where the Lego pieces are going to be and understanding their relationship to each other. So even it's a master plan from that perspective. We're going to go down and hold down into small details further down later on in the process. I think the one thing that I like to start is the existing condition. So what is it about this park? What we've heard is that this is the heart of the community, has been here for many, obviously many years. This is where you guys celebrate your graduation. This is where you celebrate your 4th of July. It's a very meaningful place for everybody here. And what was interesting is I found this image of the park in 1912 and how even back then people were coming here, camping and having a good time, and because it was such a very important piece of the community. And I think that what you're going to find is that although we're making some suggestions within the master plan, we're making some suggestions for safety, but overall the idea is we're going to always go back to, you know, how is it that we can make it better, but also maintain that essence of what this park has always been for the community. So, and even some of the renderings and sketches that I'm going to show you, these are more like studies that I like to do just to understand the spaces, not looking at the architecture of what this place could actually look like in the future. So with that, one of the things that I started looking at is, you know, is the existing condition is actually the entrance and traffic pattern. So a quick story, my wife and I, we have 2 girls, and my wife always takes the girls to the park, and so for me, understanding what, as a dad, understanding, you know, the relationship for a mom and a dad and the kids in the park is very, very critical. So I always think of it like, if my daughter were here, my wife was here, you know, what would make it easier and safer for her and our girls. So, number one is the traffic pattern at the moment. You know, you guys know where you enter, which is the road right through here. But really, it's here we go. You enter right through here. It's an issue in that you do have, you know, this loop system that goes around. Sorry, Dave, I have to draw. You have this loop system that goes around the park, right, which works really well in the historic. But the problem is when you enter and when you exit, you know, it was one of the things that kind of like caught my attention real quick. So that's number one. The second piece that I'm going to show you is, the parking situation. And at the moment, and actually we just drove by the park right now, we saw there was a baseball game going on, there were a lot of kids and families in the pool, and there were cars parked on the grass, So meaning that even the parking itself doesn't really function really well in terms of the kind of activity that the park really has. And if you look at it, well, here I just did a couple of lines, showing where most of the parking is actually at, and then the rest of it is kind of like ad hoc, right? You pull around the grass, you park there, which is great, but over time, as you can imagine, it does make an issue in terms of the grass. So one of the ideas that we started toying about with is, what if we flipped everything on its head, okay? And I'm going to zoom in here so everybody's able to see, and here we go. And rather than everybody entering from here, which is what's happening now, we flip that and we actually enter right through here. And you're going to ask, well, why are we going to flip that around? And wait a minute, what happened to our pool? That's going to come up next, so just hold on for a second. But for now, thinking that if we are to change the entrance right through here, what you see automatically is on your left, you're going to have a whole new big parking lot. I think the count is about 140 parking spaces, But that means that you enter the park, you automatically on your left, you have a parking, and then after you're done, getting the kids hopefully tired enough to go home, then you're able to just go back out in the way that normally people come in. But what that does do is a very simple thing, which is it makes this a very simple loop that allows people to enter, park, and get back out without necessarily overloading the loop that you have for the rest of the park. So that means that now kids are able to run around the rest of the loop, and it's actually cutting down on the traffic that you have there. So that's number one. And then the second thing that you notice is, what we try to look at is all opportunities and potentials where we could actually add more parking. So you're going to see some diagonal parking there. You're going to see some parallel parking here. And the idea is to balance the parking on both sides of the ring. As right now we're driving around, Wendy and I, we saw a bunch, all the family there playing and sitting down and watching the game going on. But if you have a balanced parking both sides of the ring, then that means people are able to find park, and get out even faster. So that's behind the idea of not only banking everything in one part, but also adding in different places. Then there was an opportunity, because we heard a lot about all the shelters that are here, right? And also the brick pavilion up here on the top. And, this actually has, right up here, and we drove up there before, there's a potential for even more bank of parking, I mean, there's enough right away there that you can add parking. Basically, it's just asphalt. But the idea is, when you have your 4th of July, then that parking is actually only, or it could be used for for everybody who's going to the pavilion. Or whenever there's a graduation, this is where people will be able to park and then walk up to the graduation area. But that still doesn't mean anything, doesn't do anything with the current parking that you have in front of the community center. So that kind of stays as is, so that doesn't change very much. And this is just a quick diagram again to show you now the idea behind this loop, and you enter and you park and you go back out again. You could also still go around the whole loop as you do now, but also all the pieces are just labeling all the new parking possibilities that we are adding to the park. I think the next piece that we're going to talk about is the existing condition of the aquatic center or the pool area. It's what we've heard is that it's right in the entrance to the park. It's a great focal point as you come in. But there are a lot of structural issues with the park, with the building. There's issues with the pool. We heard that it leaks. We heard that at one point there were like 600 people sitting in the pool, and nobody could even move because it's actually such a great center of the community, but it's not scaled enough for what it really needs to be there. So with all those in mind, what we started thinking about is, okay, well, if we were to get this part here and actually convert that into parking, as I showed you before, where could the pool go? And one idea is it could go literally across the road, across the street. So again, this is where the current pool is at. The idea is you move the house across the street, and then where right now you have the basketball and the tennis courts, that's where your pool ends up being. Now, the idea with the pool is, what we heard from the community is that you guys would like to have something that is more like competition style size. but at the same time, it has a little bit of an aquatic center, meaning, like the kid playing area with water, and also like the low entry pool, which means that you're able to walk in and literally you step into like an inch of water, and it starts getting deeper and deeper the further in you go. And that means that in one pool area, you could actually have the whole entire family having fun. So that's the idea behind this pool. And, these are some of the images from around different places of that logic, which is like big pool. You have a lot of area for kids, for the family, and then of course you have the competition area or the place for the more serious swimmers. And this is, again, like I was saying, I mentioned, the architecture, don't think about it. This is just a study diagram to see what it could look like, but this is what we're thinking. If you notice, the nice thing about this is that you are able to park in front, right? That's the new parking lot. You cross the new road here, and then you're already in the pool house. This pool house becomes like a pivot, a center point for a number of things. Number one, storage of anything that you need for the basketball or the tennis courts. Number two, it's also the area where you have the locker and anything that you need for the pool, including the pool equipment. And then number three, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, is this here, which is a new playground area for the kids, where the current playground is at right now. Okay? But meaning that this building all of a sudden becomes a very important pivot point. And one of the things that Chris had mentioned, which is thinking about how can we do more revenue generating around the whole park. Well, we think that this could be potentially one, because you could have, and as we see here in the sketches, you could have a big space there that you could potentially have for events, and rent it out for parties or pool parties and all that good stuff. So now there's a revenue possibility for the events. And so the other thing that we also did mention is the possibility of a concession stand in here. And what we're talking about is it could be anywhere from like a small little, area where you have a little, a coffee machine, all the way to like a small little room that, somebody walks on the other side, open up the window, and is able to start selling drinks for everybody who's at the park. So there are multiple ways that we can do this. The one thing I'm going to touch up on this, because I have this drawing here at the moment, is the following. If you notice the idea behind this is what we call a breeze break, which is kind of like a hallway, but it's outdoor. But then that means that there's a piece of the building here that's where we're going to have a lot of the doors that you enter the building from that area. And one of the things that we're thinking about is that in this building, it could be one of the two locations that you could have year-round toilets facility for everybody to use, because you see, now you have a bigger building where you're housing all this equipment. You don't have to worry about, the extreme cold weather and all that. So, and also, this this roofing that we see here actually will keep all the rain or all the snow away, so that when you enter into the toilet in the restroom area, at least it's much more comfortable. But so that's the other thing that we're thinking about. And again, now this is going to be very close to the main parking lot that you're going to have in your park area. So that's one of the big things, very important things to keep in mind. In terms of the existing community center, we're not looking at, I don't think we're looking at making major changes. The idea there is to make some renovations, but it's going to be more interior. You guys spent a lot of money there, and it looks great. So it's a matter of making it, more cleaner, not cleaner, more improvement in the inside, but also making now the connection to all these new amenities that we're tying onto it, including the new sidewalks that we're looking into adding, right? So, so there's not going to be a lot from the outside perspective. The one thing that I think I'm kind of excited about, and again, my wife loves when our daughters go out and play in the playground, and then they come home and they're already tired. And the one thing that we realize is that a lot of playgrounds are actually like one faceted. It's almost like you have the same gyms that you play and that's it. Kids kind of get bored after a while. So that's when we started looking at this playground. That's one, number one. Number two is also the fact that it's a little bit old. The material is great because it's wood, but it does cost a lot of splinter. But the one thing that we heard a lot is that it's not ADA accessible, so meaning that a lot of kids are not able to play there. So what we're thinking is the following. We are thinking, that's playground number one. Playground number two, for me at least, is this area, which is that very nicely wooded area immediately to the north of the current playground. And I thought of it as playground just because it just calls, it's such a wonderful space there. And then number 3 is the playground right at the entrance, which is part of this baseball field, which we'll talk about how those 3 playgrounds are going to play a role in the bigger concept. And so again, some of the images of the existing playground, but let's go back now into what we're thinking of doing there for it. What we're thinking is the following. We're thinking of like these three different places to become almost 3 different types of playground. The first one, which is where you currently have the playground, is actually one where you can have more for like kids, like toddlers and like 5-year-olds, that they can play. All the toys are very low to the ground. The second one would be more of like tactical, meaning that's where you have more sand, more water, more wood, natural materials, and I'll show you some images of what I mean about that. And then number 3 is going to be more of what you find of a regular playground equipment, a little bit larger, but it could be used for absolutely everybody, all the kids. These are a couple of images of what I mean by a toddler or small type of children playground. It's one that's accessible by everybody, including very, very young kids. And which you almost want to separate it from like the 10 or 12-year-old because, they're playing at a different speed, So that's the reason why we think that this would be a great spot. Plus, this is also where we know that at the moment, the current playground has a lot of things that the community has invested a lot of sweat equity, like putting the names of the community members and a lot of other pieces. And what we're thinking is, along with this modern playground, is that we could actually do a lot of art pieces with those pieces of wood that has all the community members as part of a wall installation, so that we still play homage to what is there now, but now, of course, it's going to be as part of a modern installation, modern playground altogether. This is what I mean by the second playground, which is one that is more sand, it's more wood, wood blocks where you can move around. So I could just see my 10-year-old moving the wood blocks around with her friends and sitting down and talking to each other because they don't want to be next to me. But so that's the kind of relationship that you want to have in this playground. So it's more fun, more sand, and in some cases, like I mentioned, they even have like area for water fountains for kids to play with. So it gives you a lot more playing capability. And then the third playground, which is the one that is close to the new parking lot, it's more like this, which is more of a regular playground, slightly more higher, but it's one that actually tries to fit like right in the middle so that everybody's able to play there. So those are the 3 playgrounds that we're thinking about doing. And again, what I mean is, playground number 1 is this one here, number 2 is this one here, and number 3. So where does the third playground comes around? It's because if we were to change the roadway, the entry of the roadway, slightly more toward the east, that means that the current playground that you have there at the entrance is no longer there. You can't have it there because it's too close to the street. So that's why we're thinking of moving that one further in, okay? Which means that at that point, a parent that's coming in to watch a baseball game here is able to park their car, walk over here, drop off Junior there, and then walk down a couple more steps, and then you're able to see Junior number 2 playing baseball. So that's the new relationship that we're trying to build away from the main road and now closer into the park itself. That's safe for everybody. But the one thing that you're going to see also in this image is that, because we're looking at moving the entryway, then we're shifting this baseball field slightly more toward the east, which means that all of a sudden you have a new baseball field. Because we're also shifting it slightly south, then we have to disturb some of the topography that happens here. And by doing so, then now we're having to build this new retaining wall that at the same time serves as stepping, concrete steps, so people are able to sit there and watch the game. So it's kind of like 2 for the price of 1 from that perspective. The other thing that I forgot to mention when I was talking about parking is that we heard, well, what about when people come in here, because everybody's used to driving in this way, how are they going to be able to turn around? And then the next thing followed by somebody's mentioning that people would like to park on that side too. So that's what we looked at creating this design of a parking area that is a very simple couple spots, but cars come in and you're able to do a turnaround and then exit back out very, very easily. But this area also serves as, if in case you do have a big baseball game, you could also have like food trucks in there too. So it could be used for multiple things. The other thing that I want to show you now is, at the moment, as I mentioned, you do have your tennis courts here and your shifting the playground down to a new area, which is part of the big green space that you have at the moment. So now you all of a sudden get new tennis court and new basketball courts. But then we're also looking at the big green space there that, you know, it's placed for like soccer, right? But as we're standing there, we notice that the whole entire field is actually pitched slightly toward the east, which makes it great if you're like you're the home team because you know where to kick the ball, right? But the opponent's not going to be so happy with that. But what we're thinking is looking at the whole entire field and actually making it flat. So actually literally going out there and making a little bit of earthwork to make it flat. And then of course, the other thing that we heard is that in some of the baseball fields down in the south is to have dugouts and maybe fixing some of the fences so that way, you know, it feels much more cohesive. So we're also looking into those pieces as part of the fields. And then the other piece that I now want to talk about is the brick pavilion, which we have heard a lot about. But not only have we heard a lot about it, but we also were very impressed because it has such a fantastic view, tremendous view of the whole entire park. So we said, first of all, it's used for graduation. Second of all, we heard that sometimes people rent it out for parties and things. So we said, how about if we do something to actually make this even better, you know, for as a revenue generating capability. So this is the existing condition that you have now. And one of the ideas that we started toying with is, what if we were to add a big deck, wooden deck toward facing east? So meaning that when you come out of this building, you're going to have this nice big deck, you're going to face and look over the whole entire park. But imagine that these for the 4th of July, that would be fantastic, right? But the other thing that we look at is, if you notice, this is all the new parking that we're looking at doing here. And creating some sort of a way that you're able to walk all the way out to this brick pavilion without, you know, getting your feet dirty. Now, I'm thinking more of like people, graduation, party, really well dressed up. Well, now they'll be able to go on the sidewalk rather than, you know, running around in the grass. The one thing that we heard about this place is that you don't have any handicap parking, right? So we looked at also ways of actually adding toward the back more land there. Basically, what you do is you cut the topography you have there, you cut it, and then you're able to push the land over to the side, and you're able to create a bigger pad. Then all of a sudden now you have 4 or 5 parking spaces there. And this is some of the images of the idea that we're thinking about. The top left idea is that the whole wall that faces the main wooden deck, rather than having the windows and the wall as you have now, that whole thing gets cut out, and instead you have these garage doors, which I'm sure you must have seen them in a lot of restaurants. They have these large garage doors that you open up, and also the inside and the outside become one big space, which is fantastic for hosting larger events. And then an image of a wood deck that we think that would go very well there. And this is a quick sketch that I did just to understand what it may look like. The sizes, of course, we still have to work on. But the one thing that I want to point your attention to is that we're thinking of also adding a piece to the building at the moment so that you're able to access the restrooms from inside of the building. So whenever you have an event during the week, during the winter time, you don't have to go outside. You could actually access the restroom from inside. And this would also be one of the restrooms that could be completely winterized. Thank you so much. Winterized, so that it could be used throughout the whole year. So these are the 2 areas that we're looking at winterizing restrooms. So one is going to be the main pool house. The second one will be at the brick pavilion. The other thing that we want to talk about are the toilets, the shelters, and the path. And I kind of grouped them all together just because it's part of this little linear piece that actually goes into the bigger park. The one thing that you notice is that you have all this beige line that goes around the whole entire circle here. And that's because we're thinking of creating a walking path that actually has like, you know, 1/4 of a mile, or half a mile, 3/4 of a mile. So as a person, you're able to go out there and start your morning at 0 and then you start walking, you know, you go twice around and it goes a mile, that kind of stuff. So having an actual path versus having to walk on the street, which would make it a lot safer. So, but the other thing is we're looking at ways of making more connections throughout the whole entire park as we see there. So now you have this sidewalk that also takes you up to the other area where the shelters are. But more importantly is that, you know, how can we make this park be more connected to the community so people don't have to drive here? One idea would be, and as you can see here, is there will be a sidewalk that actually brings you from the community into the park. And and then there'll be a second sidewalk that from the bridge here, not only does it bring you into the park, like it does right now, but also takes you around, and then you end up in the middle of the parking lot, that then you end up terminating onto the new pool house. So the idea here is making all this connection from the community into the center of this park, that, you know, for anybody, including parents with kids and strollers. The other two restrooms that we have, which is 1 and 2 here, the idea would be that those restrooms will be completely removed, and in their place, we're gonna have, it's a whole new kit, that literally they bring it in a truck, they dump it, they put it right there, they plug in everything, and the lighting and the plumbing, and it's ready to go. But these guys are now winterized, this will be more for like the summer session, which is where you're gonna be using the field more than anything else. But that's the idea behind those two restrooms. And then the shelters that I was talking about is because, you know, when we're looking at this little lake here, we heard that you would like to have some sort of more engagement with that lake, and we didn't want to do a lot because you could have a really great bandstand here. You could have a nice way to get there, but once you get there, it feels like very natural with a nice nice lawn. So we looked at creating just very simple 1, 2, and 3 little park shelters with a picnic table in the middle. So as a family, you can sit there with your kids, you know, bring sandwiches or burgers and stuff and sodas and sit there with the kids, and you know, it just feels like a little picnic. So that's the idea behind those shelters. And then finally, the last piece I was going to talk about, and I'm almost on time, is the amphitheater. We've heard a lot about people, you want to have a place that you can have, you know, bigger events, and you can have, you know, multiple things that can happen. And we started thinking about this for a while, and one of the places that actually fits really, really well is having an outdoor amphitheater that functions like what I'm going to show you right now. And if you notice, what I'm talking about is this place here. If you look at it, the graphic, it shows you more like an amoeba, and that's because, number one, this is, like I said, very high-level conceptual, still hasn't been worked out. We still need to look at the topography and the slopes to make sure that it works. But the idea is that you literally get the dirt and you push it around, so you are able to make all these terraces, and people are able to sit on those terraces and look down onto a space in front of you. The wonderful thing about this idea, though, is that, see this space here, is what at one point we were calling it a football, but now it's like a deflated football, I guess, because it's only half of football, but it's basically a stage, which is about 2 or 3 feet off the ground, made out of concrete, right? That's where you have outlets and you're able to open up a little door, plug in. So if you have movie night, you're able to do the projectors and your screen, and you inflate the screen, and then you are able to have movie nights, or if you have a band, you're able to plug in the outlets there and then start playing music. The cool thing about this stage is that you could either have a backdrop there, and you can have people looking this way and performing to people sitting on the grass, or that could be flipped around. That you have the back of the stage here, and they can be playing this way onto the green field. So that's the reason why it's just a platform, and then you allow the different artists to come in and like do whatever rigs they have to do for the backdrops. But the idea is that the stage becomes a center point where you already have electricity and the capability there to plug in all the amplifier systems and things that you need to do. And just to give you an idea for it, these are 2 images of what I'm talking about. If you notice here, the topography is actually used. The terracing actually used with some topography and the slope, and that's where people sit. Now, I've also heard, and I'm sure that my girls would be here, whenever there was snow, this is where they would go and play in the snow, because they'll be able to roll down and things. But it's kind of like the same fun thing that you have now, with the same gradual slope that you have at the moment. But it is something that has been used in many, many places around the world, and I think it would be a really great place to finish off your southern piece of the amphitheater with this really great spot. And this is a quick drawing, quick sketch, like I mentioned before, of what it could look like in place. And of course, here, if you notice, because you do have a baseball field here, and you have the Boy Scout, and this is like a big terrace there, that's what it actually takes that space of what's naturally there in the landscape. So it's something that works, and we still have to, and like I said, like I mentioned, we still have to work on it on the design, the engineering of it, but the concept is that it can work really well in that space. And with that, thank you very much.
such as, the cross-country team, and making sure we protect their course, disc golf, making sure that, or the frisbee golf, to make sure that we don't interfere with the field, that we conserve the history around Rainbow Dreamland. We'll make sure that we continue to solicit community feedback as we move into the next phase. And so approval tonight from City Council will allow us to move to that next design phase, and all of those plans will also be presented for approval.
Sounds good? Turn the lights on, please. So we're gonna open this up for questions and comments. We're gonna limit it to like 3 minutes. If it goes longer, I'm gonna have to, let me hear.
I'm going to ask that anybody that has a question speak loud and give your name before you start, please.
Janine Charlton. I live west of the park. Have anybody taken into account this park? I just heard about it this weekend. This is awesome. I've lived here all my life. This is awesome. But by making this bigger and inviting more people into our town, there's a safety issue. People drive on that walkway. People park in other people's yards to get to the park. How is this going to affect the people that live by this park and their yards are connected to this park?
So I think you're talking about the comments that happened last year, on July 4th?
Yes.
Yes. And we have addressed those with you, that we are putting the barriers up, and we are taking into consideration, but as you can see, that there's going to be a lot more parking for the community to have access to. And then we are addressing the issues that happened last year.
Okay, over by the log cabin, the walkway. A lot of kids come up over that hill to get to the park. Is that going to be improved for safety?
You mean coming across Biggin Avenue?
Yes.
I don't think that's in the plans, but it's something we can look at. Anything else?
Sandy Waggle, I can't help but notice there's nothing on here for the dog park, like we're parking in the grass up there, with enough spots for maybe 3 cars, and everybody else has to park in the grass. We dropped off letters requesting some improvements up there. Is that something that could potentially be added to the plan?
Yeah, it sort of got left out of this plan, but we definitely want to upgrade the fencing up there, and big school seating, and yes, the parking areas are upside down up there. That hopefully will be working. So, like I said, this is just wide scope to get this narrowed down. Go ahead.
Bonnie Robinson. I used to be the finance director here, and I know what kind of money comes in and out of this city, and we'll never have a chance to do something like this again that's paid for. I mean, this is wonderful. It will help the community.
Marlene Figley. I just want to say, I think this is a great idea. I love it. But as someone that would be probably using the amphitheater, a roof would be awesome because it is so hot when you're singing. I mean, I know, and it always rains on me. Right? And it seems awesome. I love how you can work it both ways, but if there could just be some sort of roof, that would be amazing.
Hi, Kelly Booth. Thank you for mentioning cross-country course, by the way. I did notice that 4 of the improvements are kind of going to be on the course. The planning date to start this, is it going to be after this year's cross-country season has ended?
So we're going to, next steps, we'll get to the design phase, and then we'll have more of a detailed timeline, but we're going to ensure that we work with the community
Leach. Can you know just a little more detail about the pool as far as size goes? Some people that swim every day were a little concerned it's smaller.
We don't have the exact size because, again, the details of the pipe are not having to be worked out. But the one thing that we try to do is we try to basically take your current pool and move it over to the left and then add a whole new pad area to it. Which, we heard that it's more chlorine and more water they have to maintain, but, the kiddies are going to be happy for it. But yes, it's actually going to have basically a space for swimming and playing, and it's going to be bigger than what we have. And bring more revenue, yes.
Talking about the pool, is there going to be grass around the pool? Because not everybody wants to put the pounds on cement.
Yeah, a lot of that are going to be still work on the next phase. But yeah, we're going to obviously look at the best, what's being used in pools around the country as examples.
Grass is important.
Yeah.
Lisa Mahoney, thank you for the 3 playgrounds. I love children and the opportunity that they have to play on different playgrounds. I am going to say I did help to raise money and build the playground, so please, please, please keep that part of our history alive and well. One concern that I have, huge concern, the tactile playground, the sand. We have a lot of cats in this town. That becomes a wonderful litter box. So please consider that when you look at this thing. Okay? Thank you.
Those cats.
Don Carson, has there been any consideration given to over by the bandstand? There is somewhat of a natural feeder there, that could also be terraced for seating there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we kind of thought about it. What we're looking at is a place, because we heard that you guys have the 4th of July, which is a huge event. So we're thinking about what other big events like that you can actually have, and then somehow, the grandness of that space, of that need, and the quaintness of that area around the pond. And also you have a lot of trees around the pond, which means that you're not going to have really great visibility. So that's the reason why we went back again to the southern piece of it.
I understand that, but where the hillside is, there are no trees between the hillside and the bandstand at all.
Okay, we'll look at that.
Okay, and second thing, and I don't know, you keep saying about the 4th of July, which is the thing that brings more people into this community than anything, but where the amphitheater and that is, I have no idea on this. Will that interfere with the setting off of the fireworks? Because it's in that area.
It just couldn't be used that way.
You just won't go for it. Yeah. Okay.
So under Jericho, I have a question, and what about local workers? Are you going to hire local to do this building? Or are you bringing other people in to do this that Norfolk's going to pay for? Or are you going to have our local men and women do it?
When we get to further along in the design plans, Michael and Karen team, we plan to have a bidding process where we use local, of course, if they're qualified businesses that can do the construction work here. Hopefully right here in East Palestine, we're very close to the surrounding communities.
We like to keep as much business local as we can.
The pond, 50, 60 years ago, you used to ice skate on that pond. There used to be a shed there with a barrel for heating, and the kids used to be able to skate on that. They haven't been able to do that in over 30 years.
I guess that's something, if the pond freezes, we can look into it, check our insurance company and stuff.
Because quite a few years ago, there was kids over there skating, and the people that lived there in the park called the police on them, and the kids had to leave. They were not allowed to skate.
Don't the Clarks skate on that pond?
I don't know who
I've
does.
seen them out there all, whenever the ice is thick enough.
That's great.
Yeah, I don't even have to introduce myself. Thank you, Greg. Greg McCormick. Just as a suggestion, I'm 100% in favor of this. I love the idea of it. It's a great investment on one of the few assets that this village has. As far as the parks go and recreation, a couple of months back, I was talking with the park board about the possibility of doing mountain biking trails inside of the wood line that wouldn't impede with anything inside of this plan. Just wondering, because Alameda has a gorgeous park, they offer the same thing. If that would be a possibility to look into.
That would be, that would definitely be something to consider.
Well, it's just like the disc golf. People do travel. I mean, it's kind of crazy to say that I drive an hour and 20 minutes to ride 10 miles, but people do, and I think it would still be able to be just right inside of the wood line, still be able to utilize all of the pathways that are in, and would also bring more people potentially with an upkeep. There's a local group who take care or know more about the fundings and the insurance and all of that, who help with trail development.
Okay. We can contact you to get more of that.
Oh, I can call them right now. Yeah.
In the chemistry, I have a thought. You have the amphitheater where you want it. Why not consider moving it up to the ball field that's not being used right in front of the Girl Scout camp? You've got an actual hillside right there. You've already got, you could go terrace there. Because if you're gonna keep the loop, you're gonna have to block off the loop if you're having events. By going back in there, you could come up the side and walk across. Okay? And if you're going to move the ball field down where the playground is, that's going to be a very small ball field. Because the creek does not run in a straight line. It runs at an angle. You also have the old Little League field that was built in 1950-something. My father was the originator of that plan. And then they put the next ball field in that people that own McDonald's built. That field's not being used. Keep that field, the original Little League field. And then the field that Belichick built, make that a multi-purpose field. Make it an 8-10 or a 10-12. We currently don't have any pony league teams, so you could utilize that. Now that field needs a lot of work on it, hasn't been used for a while. But those are just ideas that I have thought about, because seriously, I've probably been in the park more than anybody else in this room over the last 50 years. So I mean, I have a pretty good idea of what's there. And I'm all for the plan. I'm just trying to make us utilize the space and the opportunities that are going to be presented in this situation. Thank you.
Like Kristen said earlier, this is just an overview. If council gives the okay tonight, it would be maybe a little more further in depth in the design and maybe find something that's presented here tonight that could be saying, hey, that's not going to work, we're going to have to go this route. So this is just an overview of what we're looking at.
All right, take on that. direction and we're open to everything. Council, any discussion by you?
I have a comment. In reference to how you designed the entrance and the exit, I would like to keep it the way it is because of all the people on Park Drive coming in and out. My suggestion would be just change the direction in the roof itself. Where you come in the existing entrance, you make a right instead of a left or out. Those trucking companies, what do? They make right turns. They don't make left turns. By doing that, you would be able to come, keep Park Drive going both directions, come in the entrance to the park, go straight out again. Or pull into the parking, or pull up into the pool, drop off, and make the right again. If you want to go around, pull right around the park. All we would be doing is changing the direction to keep everything consistent. That's just my I mean, it's pretty basic. Everything else, Mike's wonderful ideas. There'll be a lot of changes before this is done. I know that, I realize that. I don't think anybody sitting here is going to hold this in stone, this is cut in stone. That's all I have.
No? No. You gotta read this.
I'll introduce resolution number 8-2023, and motion that be read by title only. Okay, I'll make a motion that it be read in full.
So this is a resolution authorizing continuation of the East Palestine Park renovation project. Whereas the Village of East Palestine suffered a declared emergency as a result of the derailment of a Norfolk Southern train in the village and the subsequent effects of multiple emergencies created hereby. Whereas Norfolk Southern has voluntarily undertaken a study and review of renovations and upgrades to the East Palestine Park with plans to undertake said plans and renovations with no cost to the village, and whereas a preliminary plan and proposals prepared by Michael Baker International of Pittsburgh, PA, was submitted to council at a regular scheduled council meeting on June 12th. Whereas, after receiving positive comments from council members and the audience, the council has scheduled a public hearing on the proposal for June 19th at 7 p.m. Now therefore, the council of the Village of East Palestine hereby resolves that, after consideration and review of the proposed plans and renovations and receipt of public input, Michael Baker International is authorized to continue to develop detailed plans and specifications for the proposed renovations and upgrades to East Palestine Park. All plans and upgrades to the East Palestine Park shall be approved by council prior to commencement of any construction. All formal actions of this council concerning and relating to the adoption of this resolution were adopted in an open meeting of this council, and that all deliberations of this council that resulted in this formal action were in meetings open to the public in compliance with all legal requirements, including section 141 and 22 of the Ohio Revised Code.
And I will call for a vote on resolution 8-2023.
Ms. May? Yes. Mr. Kaminsky?
Yes.
Dr. Rocco? Yes. Mr. Ryan?
Yes.